So it has been a while since I've talked about 2000s horror movies. Now, if you're new around here, one of my controversial opinions, the 2000s is one of the best decades of horror. It is my personal favorite. I can't say it's the best because that is a subjective opinion, of course, but it is the best to me. It is my favorite era of horror, specifically the early 2000s, late 90s, early aughts. That's typically the era that I love the most, but today we're talking about the 2000s, just in general. From 2000 to 2009, here are 10 hidden gems from that era. Now, of course, a lot of these are streaming, and I will tell you exactly where they are streaming, but if you're not in the US, that is where NordVPN comes into play. I've been using NordVPN for years at this point, and it is one of my favorite resources to find horror movies streaming that may not be available in the US. And it is hands down the easiest VPN to use. All you have to do is click on the country that you want to view their content from, refresh your streaming service, and it's just like you are located in that country with access to all of their horror media. So I want you to leave a comment down below and let me know where you're from and which of these movies are streaming where in your country to help everyone out, because I'm looking for some of these specifically that aren't streaming in the US. So if you could just pop a comment, let me know what is streaming where you are. Now, of course, that's not all that NordVPN offers, although that is the feature that I personally use the most. A VPN protects you and your data and your privacy from cyber attacks and hacking and things like that with their threat protection, which actually runs in the background, even if you're not even connected to a VPN server. It also blocks malware and malicious ads and keeps you completely anonymous while online, so you don't have any weird tracking of your location or your information. So make sure to go to nordvpn.com/possessedbyhorror, or you can click the link down in the description box below for a 2-year plan with an exclusive deal plus 1 month for free, and it's completely risk-free with NordVPN's 30-day money-back guarantee. So let's get into the hidden gems of the 2000s. Now, I'm so excited to talk about so many of these because I've never talked about them on the channel before, and I love them. First up, we have Splinter from 2008. Trapped in an isolated gas station by a voracious splinter parasite that transforms its still living victims into deadly hosts, a young couple and an escaped convict must find a way to work together to survive this primal horror. This movie is like the definition of underrated in my opinion. There's so many on this list that are the definition of underrated to me, but this one specifically because I remember it being a little bit cheesier when I first watched it years and years ago, and I recently rewatched it and I was like, this is so fantastic. First of all, the practical effects. All of the effects in this, the gore, everything is practical. I think there's a little bit of CG with the splinter effect because there's splinters coming out of people, but the practical effects in this are incredible. The gore, the disturbing transformations of the people, so good. It kind of has like a zombie-esque vibe to it, which is relevant with the Last of Us show coming out, and everyone's talking about that kind of zombie with the fungus taking over. Let me know if you want me to talk about that eventually. Where I think Splinter lacks a little bit is like an explanation or like a plot that's like deeper, but to me it doesn't really need it. This is a very good movie to just like pop on, watch with people, be grossed out by the images in it. It's just really well done overall, like the acting, everything, and it's a single location movie, so it's just very simple and straightforward. Next up, we have The Host from 2006. This is a Korean movie from Bong Joon-ho. Careless American military personnel dump chemicals into South Korea's Han River. Several years later, a creature emerges from the tainted waters and sinks its ravenous jaws into local residents. When the creature abducts their daughter, a vendor and his family decide that they are the only ones who can save her. So Bong Joon-ho is actually one of my favorite directors and creators of all time, not just in the horror genre, but in general. Like Parasite, I think is one of the best movies ever made. Snowpiercer is one of my top 10 movies, I would say, of all time. So with The Host, he wanted to make a monster movie, which I think was successful. I loved this movie so much, but everyone around him had their doubts, and they told him not to waste his talents on a monster movie, which I think is really unfortunate. I'm glad he still went ahead and did it, but he did write this movie more in secret because no one really believed in him or his vision for this movie. But it's great. It leads a little bit more action-y, but I like that he used realistic people. It's not like a savior storyline. I don't know what I'm saying. It's not like your typical hero story that saves the day. You know, it's like an average family, and I love that he kind of puts average, relatable people in all of his movies, so this one is no exception. I love The Host. Definitely watch it. Next is a movie that I cannot believe that I have never heard of before, and I'm sure a lot of you have heard of this, but I was just like, why have I never seen this? And that is Cursed from 2005 from Wes Craven. Have I not seen this? A werewolf loose in Los Angeles changes the lives of 3 young adults who, after being mauled by the beast, learn they must kill it in order to avoid becoming werewolves themselves. So this stars Christina Ricci and Jesse Eisenberg, which is such a strange duo to me. Like, I saw them in this and never thought I'd see them work together again. How have I never heard of this movie? Now, the making of this movie was a mess. I love the outcome. I think it's so fun. It's very reminiscent of Scream in the sense that it's campy, it's fun, it's light, it's not too heavy or anything like that or too gory. But the making was a mess, and a lot of the actors are not happy with the end result of this movie. So they had script rewrites, they had delays in shooting for over a year, so it took like 2.5 years to film this movie. They did reshoots, cutting half of the actors that were originally cast in this, and they also replaced a lot of the practical effects with CGI because the production company didn't think that the practical effects looked good enough, which to me, I don't care if it looks bad, practical effects are always going to be better and more effective than CGI, especially in the 2000s era, but of course at the time, they were using modern technology, but I think it dates the movie a little bit. And they also cut this to a PG-13 rating when it was originally shot for an R rating. So again, there's some things that are lacking. I think it would be much better if it were an R-rated movie, which normally that's not my opinion with movies that come out that are PG-13. But I'm changing my mind on a couple movies recently, including one that just came out that's PG-13. Now, Wes Craven made this movie for money. So this was a cash grab, and admittedly so. Like, they admitted that it is a cash grab because the production company offered double his rate in order to make a movie. But he said he could have made 2.5 movies by the time this movie was completed, so it really wasn't worth it for him to make this movie at all. And the actors claim that the original version of this movie was much better. They read the script, thought it was great, and then they showed up and they shot it completely differently or did reshoots. So they say that the original concept was much, much better. I wish we would see that or have gotten that. But this one's still a really fun movie. I know I'm talking a lot of crap about it, but that's because there's a lot of drama behind the scenes for this movie. Now, this is written by Kevin Williamson, who is known for writing Scream 1 and 2, which are great. Obviously, that's why it kind of has an element of Screamness to it. But he also wrote the newest COVID movie, Sick, which is on Peacock, and I will be doing a review for that shortly, hopefully by next week. Next up, we have a movie called Creep from 2004, not to be confused with This Creep. This Creep is fantastic as well, but obviously not from the 2000s. Trapped in a London subway station, a woman who's been pursued by a potential attacker heads into the unknown labyrinth of tunnels beneath the city's streets. Now, I said Splinter was the definition of underrated, but I think this movie is the most underrated on this entire list. I've actually been recommended this a couple of times over the years, and I just never was that interested in watching it. I don't know why, it just didn't appeal to me. I thought it was going to be super low budget and just one of those Tubi movies, if you know what I mean. But given the practical effects, the makeup, the length of time it took them to put the makeup on, and just all the effects and the acting and the performances, just everything was pretty well executed. And even if it was lower budget, you couldn't tell. And I don't know if it's because I went in with like a little bit lower expectations, but this one turned out to be very surprising, and I would 100% rewatch this. This is a great like trapped underground type movie. I should just do a video of like trapped movies, like just single location, they're trapped. Now, I thought most of the story was going to be very straightforward in this, but there's surprises along the way. I wasn't expecting where it went with the ending and how brutal it got. This movie is definitely not for the weak stomach or the faint of heart. It's definitely disturbing towards the end, so you have been warned. Next up, we have Boogeyman, 2005. This movie is so sentimental to me. I forgot all about this movie, and I'm so upset because I got rid of the DVD years ago. Don't know why. Why would I do that? I think I was downsizing. Clearly that backfired, and I'm not doing that anymore. I used to watch this movie over and over and over again in high school. I loved it, and I actually just bought it on Thrift Books, and they sent it to me, and I was going to rewatch it before this video because it's not streaming anywhere in the US. Again, if it's streaming where you're from, let me know. I'll use my VPN. But they sent me a disc that is the special features. It's just the bonus disc, so there's no movie on it. Anyway, as a young boy, Tim witnesses the horrifying event of his father being dragged away by the boogeyman. Despite the reassurances of his mother that the boogeyman is not real, he is never the same afterward. Now, this movie does lean very cheesy, but obviously if you're watching this video, you're kind of going to expect a little bit of that in a lot of these movies. It is the era, you know. But let me know if you've seen / heard of the boogeyman or this boogeyman, because I feel like no one talks about it. and no one's probably seen it. I don't know. Next up, we have Turistas from 2006. A group of young backpackers vacation turns sour when a bus accident leaves them marooned in a remote Brazilian rural area that holds an ominous secret. Now, this stars 2000s scream queen Melissa George. She's one of my favorite 2000s actors. Now, this movie leans a little bit more action-adventure than horror. There's some thriller elements in there, and, you know, there is some horror elements, obviously, otherwise I wouldn't have put it on this list. But if you're looking for more of, like, action-adventure and like tension, then this one's for you. It's kind of like The Ruins with a little bit less gore and not supernatural. There is a little bit of controversy around this movie with its portrayal of stereotypes surrounding Brazil and Brazilians, and people feared that it would actually make tourists not want to visit Brazil. But overall, I still am a really big fan of this movie. I love Melissa George in it, of course. I think she's more of a side character, but still. Also, random fact, it has Olivia Wilde in it, who I'm not the biggest fan of. Next up, we have Session 9. This is one that I've talked about in the past, but I think it's been a while since I've mentioned it, and this came out in 2001. Tensions rise with an asbestos cleaning crews. They work in an abandoned mental hospital with a horrific past that seems to be coming back. This is on the slower side, so a little bit more of a slower drama horror with lots and lots of tension. Beautiful setting. If you're a fan of abandoned buildings, abandoned asylums, things like that, then this movie is going to be stunning for you. And they didn't actually build any sets for this and didn't use very many props. Everything that you see in the movie was pretty much already existing there, and they only could use like one wing or two wings of the hospital because of how dangerous it was. I just like that they filmed on location and kept all of the existing graffiti and used what was already there. And the building has since been transformed into apartments. However, they did tear down some of the building, but how cool would it be to live in the Danvers building? Like, that would be so fun. Anyway, Session 9 is such a cool movie. It definitely has some twists and turns along the way, and I really love the story. So if you're down for a little bit of a slower burn with some suspense, then definitely watch this one. Next, we have Ghost Ship. This is probably one of the most recommended for the hidden gems of the 2000s, I would say, that I've seen, including House of Wax as well. Those are like the popular underrated ones, but Ghost Ship, I had to throw it in there. I mean, it is underrated. It's a hidden gem for sure if you haven't seen it. A salvage crew discovers a long-lost 1962 passenger ship floating lifeless in a remote region of the Bering Sea, and soon notices that its long-dead inhabitants may still be on board. Now, this is directed by the same guy who directed 13 Ghosts, Steve Beck, so if you're a fan of kind of the goofiness, the lightheartedness of 13 Ghosts, you can kind of expect a little bit of that from Ghost Ship. He just does like ghosty campiness so well, you know what I mean? Now, this movie was supposed to be more like The Shining on a cruise liner, which I think still applies a little bit, but it's a little bit more accurate to the original story of what this movie was supposed to be. So the original script, some of the actors read it and agreed to take part in the movie, and then they changed pretty much everything about it and changed the direction of the movie, and some of the actors have now disowned this movie. It was meant to be more of a psychological horror movie versus a gory horror movie, which I would love to have seen as well. Maybe a little bit more reminiscent of Triangle in that sense, one of my favorite movies of all time, which is also from the 2000s, so go watch that. But I still like what was executed in this. I find it to be a very fun movie and not as heavy maybe as they intended it to be, but still really, really entertaining and a really good rewatch as well. Next, we have Midnight Meat Train from 2008. Now, this one I'm not really sure if it's a hidden gem or if it's just me. That's the thing. Sometimes I don't know if it's just me and I haven't seen it, even though I think I've seen every horror movie from the 2000s, which is not true, but sometimes I think that. So I don't know if it is underrated or a hidden gem or what, but I wanted to put it in my list anyway, because I don't see many people talk about it. Even if it is well known, I don't think people talk about it now. So a photographer's obsessive pursuit of dark subject matter leads him into the path of a serial killer who stalks late night commuters, ultimately butchering them in the most gruesome ways. This movie is fantastic. It is so entertaining. If you like My Bloody Valentine, that's a really bad comparison. This is similar to Creep, so if you like Creep from 2004, you'll like Midnight Meat Train, but there is so much blood and brutality in Midnight Meat Train. It's a little bit like hard to watch. Again, kind of like Saw meets The Descent, with a very unrealistic amount of blood. Like the amount of blood that you see in this, it's just, I don't know if all of that could be in the human body. Actually, you know what? This is reminiscent of Seven to me. This is like Seven meets The Descent, which is such a weird, The Descent / Saw. I don't know. This was actually allegedly supposed to be a sequel to Candyman, which I find really fascinating. I'm not sure where that connection would have been, but that's what I read. And this is actually based on a short story by Clive Barker from his Books of Blood. So if you're a fan of Clive Barker stories, then you'd probably like the story in this one. Okay, last up is a movie that I have talked about before. It's from a franchise that I love, that I talk about all the time, so it's not going to be any surprise to a lot of you, but that is Blair Witch Book of Shadows. How could I not include this? A group of tourists arrives in Burkittsville, Maryland after seeing the Blair Witch Project to explore the mythology and phenomenon, only to come face to face with their own neuroses and possibly the witch herself. This, of course, is not for everyone. If you're a fan of like the lore of Blair Witch and like the marketing around it and things like that, you'd probably really enjoy a lot of this movie, including the beginning. It's just a really fun, like, doesn't take itself too seriously kind of movie, and the Y2K vibes in this are just immaculate, and it's definitely so different from the original. So, I mean, you could probably watch this one without even seeing the original. It is just so different. So if you're not a fan of the slowness of the first one and like nothing happening, this one is not like that at all. There's definitely stuff going on, albeit very cheesy, very campy, very 2000s. But again, you clicked on this video, so that's what you're looking for. So there you have 10 of my recommendations for hidden gems from the 2000s. I would love to know what your hidden horror gems are from this era. Let me know if you've seen any of these movies. Make sure to leave your favorite hidden gem down below. I hope you enjoyed, and I will talk to you soon. Bye.